In 1977, Universal Studios was presented with an opportunity to produce a new project that featured a wild, intergalactic tale directed by a relatively new director with a crazy vision. Universal decided to pass on it. That film went on to make over $2 billion. That film was Star Wars. And Universal was about to make a similar mistake with the Fast and the Furious franchise, if it hadn't been for none other than Vin Diesel. Later this year, The Fast and the Furious is set to release its 9th installment in the series, and depending on how well it goes, it could put it in the top 3 highest grossing movie franchises of all time. An accomplishment that, if you told certain Universal executives back in 2002, they would have laughed you out of the room. But to learn about how we got here, we have to go back all the way to 1998. In 1998, director Rob Cohen was reading the May issue of Vibe magazine, which featured an article by Ken Lee titled Racer X that chronicled illegal street racing in Queens, New York. He took that idea, and 3 years later, in 2001, The Fast and the Furious was born. But before Rob could make his movie, he had to fill his 2 main roles. And after seeing 1998's Pleasantville with Paul Walker, he knew that was his man. But opposite Paul Walker, Cohen needed to find the right person to play the physically intimidating role of Dom. And after seeing Diesel's performance in the 2000 movie Pitch Black, Cohen knew that Diesel was the right man to play the role. It took some convincing, but he was finally able to persuade the actor to join the film. However, Diesel wasn't happy with the script when it was finished. He actually spent weeks with the writers of the movie, trying to give the characters a little bit more depth and some more street cred. The effort paid off, and the movie was #1 at the box office during its opening weekend and went on to gross over $200 million. And it wasn't long until a sequel was in development. Diesel was offered $25 million to reprise his role as Dom. And with such a big payday being offered, why wouldn't Diesel want to return to the role that helped him propel to stardom? Well, a few reasons. The first being that director Rob Cohen wasn't going to return for the sequel. Rob was quoted as saying that he felt that the sequel was rushed and was poorly written, and was basically just a cash grab for the studio. Diesel and Cohen developed quite a bond while they were filming the first movie, and he was devastated when he learned his friend wasn't going to be directing. That, added to the fact that he also felt that the script was very weak, he decided to follow in Cohen's footsteps. Diesel went on to later say that he prefers the legendary Francis Ford Coppola's approach to sequels to be a direct continuation of the first, or even an exploration of the characters' backgrounds, as Coppola did with the Godfather saga. With that, Diesel decided to pass on the Fast and the Furious sequel and instead star in the Pitch Black sequel, The Chronicles of Riddick, a movie that he was very passionate about. The spin-off sequel to The Fast and the Furious, titled Too Fast, Too Furious, was released in 2003 and featured Paul Walker, again as the lead role, opposite actor and singer Tyrese Gibson. The film ended up grossing $264 million, which sounds like a good thing, right? But the fact that the studio doubled the budget for the sequel and it only made $30 more million than the first, they decided to take the franchise in a whole new direction. And that the next movie was to be set in Japan, and that Walker wasn't going to reprise his role as Brian in the next movie, which led to rumors swirling that this was because Walker asked for more money, but that was simply not the case. Walker told the LA Times that he wanted to return, and his absence came down to a new direction that the studio wanted to take the Fast and the Furious franchise. He said it came down to politics, studio stuff, a regime decision. Even though Walker didn't spell out exactly why he wasn't invited back, what he is alluding to might have something to do with how the film changed throughout development. The third installment in the franchise was to be written by writer Chris Morgan, and in 2017, he told the news outlet Collider that when he originally pitched the sequel to Universal, it was actually meant to star Vin Diesel. The story involved Diesel's character Dom going to Tokyo after someone he knows died, and he learns about drifting as he attempts to find out what happened. That sounds awfully familiar. But with a somewhat disappointing response to Too Fast, Too Furious, Universal made the decision to switch the focus to a more international and high school-based setting with a younger cast, in hopes to attract a younger, more international audience for the franchise. The studio's goal was to make as much money as possible, and the quality of the movie was secondary. Universal clearly didn't understand their fans and felt that whatever they put out next would do relatively well regardless. Because if Too Fast, Too Furious did well without 99% of the original cast, then why would this film be any different?
Hey, it's Scott Hoover with Totally Hollywood TV. We're here on the red carpet and the action's about to get too fast and too furious.
So the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift was born. A film with no relation to the past films except, well, cars and humans. As fate would have it, during the production of Tokyo Drift, Vin Diesel just so happened to be at the Universal Studios lot discussing other projects. When the topic of Tokyo Drift came up, Vin again said he wasn't interested. But Universal convinced Diesel to come back for a small surprise cameo at the end of the movie. Vin agreed, but under one condition. In return for his appearance, that Universal would give him the sole rights to his Riddick franchise. Universal, not seeing a future potential with the Riddick franchise, and not having to pay him for his role, saw this as a no-brainer and agreed. But despite Vin's small cameo, the lack of recognizable stars or a real connection to the first two films resulted in the series' worst performance of the franchise, grossing only $158 million. The film was absolutely bashed by critics and fans alike, some even going as far as to say the only good part of the film was Vin Diesel's 20-second cameo. This led to a consensus at Universal that the franchise was played out. Universal Pictures' co-president of production was quoted saying, "At that point, we were weighing on whether to even produce another sequel. We weren't sure what to do. They ended up deciding it would be best to create one more movie, with half the budget, and potentially releasing it straight to DVD, an attempt to try to capitalize on the international markets." Around this time, Vin Diesel just so happened to hear about this plan and thought it was a horrible idea. A movie he was filming had just wrapped up, so he decided to have a meeting at the studio to plead his case. After seeing a huge response from audiences from his small cameo in Tokyo Drift, Universal thought that he might know something that they don't. After a long discussion and much convincing on Vin's part, the studio ended up handing a large amount of creative control over to the actor for the future of the franchise. With Diesel back on board, Universal returned the franchise to its roots, focusing more on heists rather than underground street racing, and making the friendship between Diesel and Paul Walker a center point for future films. Another change that they decided to make was comprising a more ethnic, diverse cast to try to increase global appeal, an idea that Universal learned from Tokyo Drift, being that Tokyo Drift only grossed $62 million in the US, but its Japanese setting helped it pick up an extra $95 million worldwide. The rest is history. Diesel recommended that they hire as many superstars as they could for future films. Everyone from The Rock to Superwoman Gal Gadot. Since Vin Diesel took over creative control of the franchise, it's grown exponentially. Its past 3 films have grossed over $4 billion, and it's currently in the top 10 grossing franchises of all time. Another recommendation that Vin Diesel gave Universal was to focus more on social media. And since Vin Diesel has 90 million Facebook friends, Universal embraced the idea and gave the Fast and the Furious 6 movie the largest social media campaign in history. And the Fast and the Furious isn't slowing down anytime yet. The 9th installment in the franchise is set to release sometime later this year, and some experts are saying that this could be the highest grossing movie of the entire franchise. Moral of the story is when Vin Diesel tells you something, you should listen. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to MiLK for more content just like this.